Hi, I'm Jo from J.H.Leather, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to create this tool roll. Now the tool roll has been designed as more of a universal style with all the pockets being the same size, and it is designed so that you mount things via the handle rather than the blade. Now like I said, it is more of a universal style so that you can fit more of a variety of tools into the tool roll. Now you can change this design to fit the specific tools that you want to fit into your tool roll. You can create the pockets so that they are tailored to the size of each of the tools that you want to put in there, and you can also change the height and width of it. So that being said, let's get started.
So the first thing we are going to do is print out our patterns, and then we can start to put them together onto some card to give them a bit more reinforcement. So what I'm going to do is actually start cutting mine down a little bit to make this more easy to actually stick together when they are on the card. So you want to make sure that all the letters line up when you are putting your patterns together to get the most accurate results. And then once you are happy, what we can do is then cut those out. Now on my printer, it didn't actually print the red lines on my page, so I have had to print out another one, and I'm just going to transfer those maker's marks onto my main pattern, and then I'm just going to join them together with a pen and a ruler. Now on your patterns, you will have this marked on, so long as your printer has red ink. And so you should now have your patterns looking something like this, where you have your main one and the flap. And now in your pattern, you are also going to have the strip at the bottom for the retaining pocket strap. Now what we're going to do is start cutting out our leather. So I'm going to be using a panel hide for this, and links for this hide are going to be in the description below, as well as to all the other leathers that I am using in this video. Now what I like to do is actually cut a strip that is the width of this pattern, and I can cut that so it's nice and straight. And then what I'm going to do is also cut out the retaining strip for the handles of our tools. And then what I can do is now cut that down. So we're going to square one end of my main tool roll and cut that off. And then I can draw around my pattern and mark and cut around those corners. And then I can mark the overall length of the pattern, as well as mark on my maker's points. And it's important to mark the maker's points for the lay, and also if you are going to be putting on the little logo tab on the front. And what we can do is use a silver pen to just draw in those lines. We can then cut our tool roll to length. And then we can start working on the flap. So I'm going to be using a suede for this. And what I'm going to do is just draw around this directly onto my suede. Because it's a bit smaller, it's a bit more easy to manage. And then once I've drawn around it, I can cut that out. And again, I'm going to be using the rotary knife for this with a straight edge. And I'm just using a ruler here, but I'm weighting it down with some paper weights. And then what I can do is cut around all of that. And finally do the corners. We're also going to need some vegetable tanned leather for our strapping. So what I'm going to do is cut one strap that's going to be the lay on the top of our tool roll. And then I can square the ends of this. And then I'm going to lightly nick the corners before marking the overall length on my actual tool roll. And then again squaring that end and nicking the corners. Now sizes and thicknesses for this will be included in the information pack with the patterns. And once you've got that cut out, you can do some edging. So along the top, nice grain side, we're going to go all the way around. And on the flesh side, we're going to do two marks. We're going to mark 7 centimeters up and then 10 centimeters up. And what we're going to do is actually just edge in between those points, because that's where our closure straps will be sitting. Once we've done that, we can then mark on where we're going to do our stitching, which for this is going to be 7 centimeters and then 10 centimeters. So we're going to have a gap in the middle. Now for the handle, what we're going to do is actually stick 2 pieces of leather together. And then we can cut that down. So what I've got here is the excess of my lei, and then I've got the excess from another bit of leather. And I've just stuck those together. And what I can do is with my strap cutter, I can cut that so it's down straight on one side. And then I can set this to my strap width, which for this handle is 19 millimeters. And I can put it in the other way around and then cut it once again in the strap cutter. I'm going to get a nice, even and straight cut strap for my handle. We can then square one end and nick the corners. And then we can mark the overall length for this, and again square that end and nick the corners. So what we're going to do is mark where our stitching is going to go. So we're going to lay that on top of our lei and just transfer those stitching marks. And then we can transfer that to the other side of our strap. And we're also actually going to transfer that all the way around and draw a line across. We're going to do that on both ends because what we're going to do is edge in between those points with a number 3 hollow edge to take out a little bit more off the edge. On the top side, we can then go around with our number 1 edge tool, and then we can start to do some edge polishing. So we're going to apply our stain, polish that in, and then we can also apply some burnishing gum. Now at this point I have also cut out a little logo tab, and I am getting that prepped as well. We can then heat up our crease and draw on a crease line around all of our pieces. And you should end up with 3 pieces a little bit like this. Now what we're going to do is continue with our lei. So what we're going to do is use some nylon tape, and we're going to actually stick that to the reverse of our strap. Now what I want is for this to sit just inside the edge of our leather, because we don't want to see that when it is attached on to our tool roll, but we also do want to stitch through it. So we're just going to bring that in just a little bit from the edge. And we're going to do this all the way on the underside with just the area where the straps, which will be closing the tool roll, are going to sit. So you're going to have something that looks a little bit like this. And then what we can do is start to glue everything together. So we're going to glue onto our main body, as well as on the backing of the logo tab and the back of the lei. And when the glue is tacky, we can then stick those together. Making sure that they are nice and secure by using a roller, or you could also use a flat-headed hammer. We can now mark on our stitch line. So this is going to be 3 millimeters in from the edge, and we can mark that around the lei as well as all the way around the logo tab. And we can then follow that line with our chosen stitch marker. Now for me, for this, because there's quite a lot of stitching to do, I am using a 4 millimeter pricking iron. And I am not stitch marking this all the way through. If you prefer to do that, you can do. However, I'm very comfortable using an awl, and so that's how I'm going to be stitching this. Once we've done the stitch marking, we can then do our stitching. So we are going to start with at least 2 back stitches, and then we are going to stitch the rest of the way as normal towards ourselves, and we will be using the saddle stitch method. Now, as we have a lot of leather going on this make, what I actually like to do is on the more difficult parts where you have the most leather behind you, is I'm actually going to use a bulldog clip and attach my ruler to the back side of my tool roll. And that way it's going to keep the leather up and out the way a bit and make it a lot easier for me when I'm stitching. We can then go over this once again with our creasing iron just to make that crease line more prominent. And the next step is to go ahead and skive the undersides of our handle. We're going to skive them so it's quite a long skive down to half thickness. And then once you're happy with your skive, you can cut off the excess fluffy bits. And then we can draw in our stitch line. Now once you've done that, you can follow that line with your chosen stitch marker. And we can attach this to the lei. So I'm going to put 2 tacks in this, and I want it so it sits equidistant from the edges. And then when you're happy, you can go ahead and do your stitching. And again, we're going to be using the double hand stitch method, starting with at least 2 back stitches. And then when you get close to one of your tacks, you can pull that out and continue stitching. Once you've got one end of your handle stitched on, you can then attach the other end with some tacks. And again, we want to make sure that is nice and central on that lei on the end there. And now I only use 2 tacks for this because that's all I really need. However, if you want to put more in, you can do. And then when you're happy, once again, we can then go ahead and stitch this onto our tool roll. So your tool roll should look a little bit like this, and we are now ready to move on to the actual retaining strap that's going to fit the handles of our tools. So what I'm going to do is bring my pattern over. Now for you guys, you can just use the little pattern for the pockets itself. I didn't have that at this point, but what we're going to do is we're going to mark on where that sits. And then I'm going to use a silver pen and just highlight that a bit more so I can actually see where this is going to be. And then what we can do is actually square one end of our retaining strip. And then we're going to lay that on. And I'm actually going to cut this slightly oversized to start with because I will cut it down later. And then what we're going to do is apply some edge finish. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I do. So I'm going to be using some edge paint because this is chrome tanned leather, and I'm going to put the edge paint down the one squared edge side as well as along the top. Now whilst that is drying, what I'm going to do is transfer onto my leather where the actual pockets are going to be. And again, using a ruler and a silver pen, I'm going to mark those in. And now you can see I'm marking this onto the inside, so the flesh side of my bag. And what I'm going to do once that's all done is I'm going to follow those lines with my glue. And then I'm also going to glue around that bottom edge where those pockets are going to sit. We can then mark on the pocket distances onto the retaining strap and again draw a line with our pen and ruler. And then we can apply our glue to this as well. And then once tacky, you can attach the two together. Now what I find is that with this glue, if I tap it with a hammer or use a roller, it actually sticks much better once it's in the tacky phase. So I'm just going to be doing that around the edge first. And then once I'm happy that that's in the correct place, I can then tap down the length of where my stitching is going to be for the actual pockets. And then the final thing is to trim that excess down from that one end. And then we can use our dividers to draw on our stitch line. So that's going to be 3mm down both the short edges and along the bottom. Now, if you find you're having trouble seeing with the dividers, what you can do is go over that with a ruler and your silver pen. And once we've done that, we can then mark on where our stitching is going to be for each of the pockets. And then again, using our silver pen, we can draw those lines in. And you'll notice that these do not go all the way to the bottom. And there is a gap between that bottom stitch line and where the stitching at the bottom of these pockets will be. And that is very important. Now, with our chosen stitch marker, we can do our stitch marking. So we are going to be punching this all the way through. It's going to be a bit easier once we get onto the stitching stage. And we're going to go down each of the pockets themselves, as well as around the edge that we have marked on. And we want to have one tooth over the top of each pocket because we want a stitch there to secure that top edge down. And once you've done the pockets, what you can do is then go around the other edges. And then once you've done all your stitch marking, we can move on to doing our stitching. On our pockets, we're going to do 2 back stitches and making sure we have 1 stitch over that top edge to secure it down. And then it's just a case of just rinse and repeat with this. There is going to be a lot of stitching to do on this part of our tool roll build. And then once you've done stitching the pockets, you can go all around the edge of your tool roll. So now we can fit the flap. So what we're going to do is just mark on where that is going to be. And then using our glue, we can then glue that edge as well as the edge of our actual flap. And once they have gone tacky, you can then attach the 2 together. And then we can draw on our stitch line and follow that with our chosen stitch marker. Once again, stitch marking all the way through. And then we can stitch this on. Now, once I've done my stitching, what I'm going to do is use a hot crease and just smooth those cut edges of my leather to help get those fibres down, which is going to give me a better finish when I apply my edge paint. Now for this, I ended up doing about 3 coats in total all the way around, and in between each coat I did a light buffing as well as use the hot crease just to smooth down any sort of loose fibres. So the final thing we need to make are our closure straps. So we are going to be using a whole roller buckle for these, and what we're going to do is with our strap we are going to square one end. So I am going to draw on a bridle point onto my strap. Now you don't have to do a bridle point if you don't want to, you can do an egg point or whatever point you like. Now once you've got your point cut, what we can do is mark on our holes. So the first one is going to be 2 inches or 50mm from the end, and then I'm going to mark 5 holes on in total that are 3/4 of an inch or 19mm apart. And then what we're going to do is mark the overall length, which for these are going to be 45cm or 17 3/4 inches from the very end to where the buckle is going to be. And then what we can do is add a further 2 inches or 50mm onto that, and that's going to be our turn. So you can then square the end and you can cut that off and then nick the corners. And we're going to make 2 of these. The next step is to do our edging. So we're going to edge all the way around the nice grain side, and then on the flesh side we're going to mark a area around our turn that is double the turn length, so 4 inches or 100 millimeters, and we're not going to edge that. We can then apply our edge stain and polish that in, and then I'm also going to add some burnishing gum at this point and polish that in as well before doing my creasing. Now, for when it comes to your crew, you can do a test one first, or for me, I quite like to just roll the crew hole around my buckle, and generally I can find what one's going to fit doing that. But if you are unsure, then please do a test punch first. The one I ended up using was a 37. Now, once I've chosen that, what I'm going to do is draw myself 2 tram lines, so I've got a guide for when I'm going to punch that all the way through. And then whilst I've got my dividers out, I'm going to even up my holes so that they are in the centre of my strap. I can then punch my crew hole all the way through. As well as my punch for the holes. Now for this, I've chosen to use an oval hole. However, you can use a circle one if you want. And what I'm going to do is just punch that all the way through down both of the straps. Now, once you've done that, we can fit our buckle in and we can mark on where we're going to do our stitching. So we want to mark just where that end of the turn is, and then as close to the buckle as we can get. And then we can take the buckle off and use a set square just to even those up onto the other side of our strap. And then using our divider, we can draw our stitch line on, which is going to be 3 millimeters or 1/8 of an inch. And then we can follow that line with our stitch marker. And again, we're going to do this on both of our straps. Once we've done that, we can then skive the backs of these turns down to half thickness. And you can see I'm only just doing the very end, about 5/8 or 16 millimeters. We can then apply our glue, and we're going to apply that to both sides of our turn. And then once it is tacky, we can place our buckle on and stick that down. The next step is to do our stitching. So once again, we are going to be using the saddle stitch method, and we're going to start with 2 back stitches, and then we are also going to be doing 1 stitch over the edge just to get that leather nice and tight around that buckle. And then when you get to the end, you can do 1.5 back stitches. We're going to do this on both straps. And once you've done your stitching, you can do your finishing touches around the turn. So you can apply some more stain and re-polish. And if you want, you can also re-crease your straps. Now, the final step that we want to do to our tool roll is using our bone folder. We're going to insert that into each of our pockets to remove any excess glue. So you can push that up against the stitching, and if there is any excess glue there, this bone folder will break that up. We can now slide in our closure straps. And then we are ready to fit our tools, which for me are my beautiful array of kitchen knives. And like I said, you can alter this to suit you, so you can make it shorter if you are using shorter tools, or you can make the pockets larger or smaller depending on what you intend to put in your tool roll. This is just a guide as to make this sort of generic one. However, you can sort of go all out with it and change it and customize it as you need to fit the tools that you actually want to use in the tool roll. And once you've fitted your tools, you can roll it up and off you go.
So that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching and you learned something new. And if you did, please do give this video a thumbs up to let YouTube know and to help get this video out to more crafters. So thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. So these are all knives from our kitchen. So I have commandeered them for the last few days whilst making this video. And so I'm quite happy that they can get home. And yes, none of them match. I'm sorry about that. Such a funky little tool roll, isn't it? All right, let's go.